week from today.
Yeah. Someone I can give you my email and see you after. You can just confirm its exact place and time. And
if you could give that to our committee clerk, she can.
Great.
Okay, so I had another question. You said that you offered the education seminars to learn about the water, and then you give them a water test for half price.
Yeah, and when I say that, we basically fund half. We work with certified labs, and we offer a deal for taking the class. The class is free. The title is simple. Living on a private well. Want to know more about your well and your water treatment system? Come to this class. And we teach it in, right now, I think there's 6 different communities that we teach it in. And we do some down in southern Maine, because we do Gorham, Windham, York, Wells, things like that. And there's usually 8 to 10 attendees, and it's a 3-hour class. It always goes over with numerous questions. And the same with the real estate class. The real estate industry does really promote water testing more than, you think. They don't want anyone to know what's in the water. The reputable agents who are representing their buyer, they're having the water thoroughly tested.
So it's sounding like there's some disconnects.
Absolutely.
There's disconnects in the whole communication.
Just the state doesn't have a standard. One of the most confusing ones is in the town of Wells. You need an approved water test before you get a building permit, which means you have to drill a well before you even know you can build a house on it. Now we have no power, so we're bringing a generator and a pump to a vacant lot with a new well to do a water test, and it hasn't even been normalized, as we discussed. So the state could just make it even the playing field. This is the minimum. It's really not that difficult.
Yes, please continue, Representative.
It's sounding from all those that are opposed to the bill, everyone that we've heard from today, they like the idea that we have to promote water safety. What you're not liking is the fees coming back on the companies, and it's sounding to me like you've identified a bunch of disconnects in the standardization, in the communication. What I'm wondering is if these opponents, one, would come back to the work session and be open to amending this bill and making these pieces work. Because it sounds to me that from everybody that I'm hearing is that we've got a problem in this state, and we need to come up and find an affordable way to fix that. Do I have that right?
You do.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Additional questions?
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much for being here, and I hope you can make it to the work session next week.
Thank you.
Additional testimony in opposition to this bill. Welcome.
I know everybody's probably sick of hearing this, so I'll get it over pretty quick. It's pretty much the same thing everybody else has said. My name is Rebecca LeBranch. I'm the laboratory director for A&L Laboratories in Auburn. I live in Turner. A&L was established in 1976 to provide testing services to analyze drinking water to ensure safe, potable water for current and future generations of Maine. Through the years, we've worked to perform over 200,000 customers testing and analyzed over 2 million parameters. And while I and everyone else here, it sounds like, believes that an act to ensure safe drinking water for Maine families is a wonderful idea and concept, there's just a lot of unanswered questions. So what I have before you is kind of a list of all of mine. And I'll just highlight some that haven't already been brought out earlier today. The first part says that we shall forward a copy of test results to the department. On some days in the summer, this could be 50 to 100 reports that I would have to either email, fax, or there may be put into place Excel program to upload to. This would require more employees on my end, more time. We did this with the community compliance reporting a few years back, and it did. Several labs spent thousands of dollars to put systems in place that it was taking the place of state employees that were now having to handle that work. It significantly reduced the amount of data entry for the state employees and raised costs for all of the labs. And it also poses a lot of client confidentiality issues. Many clients walk in saying, this isn't going to go to the state, is it? They, for some reason, feel if there's arsenic in their water, that they're in trouble and they have to do something about it. So, you know, knowing that their results would be disclosed to the state would be a big issue for a lot of people. The uniform recommendations for specific contaminants, it says periodically tested for. How often? Every year? Every 3 to 5 years is recommended by the state currently. Every 10 years. It may actually be reducing the amount of work we get in our lab if it's every 10 years. It needs to be something specific established. The list here doesn't contain any of the immediate health risks like bacteria, nitrates, nitrites. Those are all very large concerns. As somebody mentioned earlier today, especially for pregnant women, the nitrates, nitrites cause blue baby syndrome. Those should definitely be included in the list of contaminants. The fees, I think we've covered that. My only question is who would have to pay them. There's several commercial labs. We assume we'd all have to pay it. We have to pay a lot of stuff. Would the state health and environmental testing laboratory also be subjected to this fee? With the municipal labs that test private well water, several communities have labs that test their own water for their systems, but they allow community members to come in and they do bacteria nitrate testing. Would they be required to pay this fee? The fee structure from the state lab already makes it near impossible to compete with them, so if they were not subjected to the same fees we were and had to raise their prices as well, it would pretty much knock us out of business. The other issue is not only paying the fee, we'd have to track the fee, collect it, find a way to pay it to the state. Who would be responsible for this? Would there be any funding provided to us to help with defraying the costs? And I think that's about it.
Thank you very much. I have a question. Do you know how many different facilities exist in the state for, aside from the state lab?
State lab?
How many private facilities exist for water testing?
I think there's 4 or 5 main ones left that,
Okay.
you know,
There's only one Maine owned.
That's
all I know. The rest are all out of state companies.
All right. I'm just, it's just kind of going back to the thought of, if it's in the yellow pages, why are we doing anything in the state lab? We're trying to, everyone's scratching their head, well, where can funding come from for these programs? And I'm wondering how much money we spend on a state lab. That seems kind of redundant when you've got private companies that do this work already. Anyway, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. That's probably more for the work session. But any questions? Senator Haskell.
I think you have one on your last page, and I know it's hard when you put a lot of work in. You've got some excellent testimony and a lot of work that you folks have put in to do this. You talked about the owner of the well.
Yeah.
Can you talk just a little bit about, isn't that whoever pays your bill? Or?
Well, that's what I'm not sure what it specifies in the bill. It says that the results would need to be forwarded to the owner of the well, and oftentimes we don't submit the report to the owner of the well. We submit it to the realtor or the buyer during a real estate transaction, to the well driller, the well treatment company. So if you actually specify the owner of the well, whose onus would that come down to having to find out who the owner is and get the report to them. And it also in that section addresses that there would be materials developed by the state that have to be distributed. And there's some comments in there as far as that goes as well. Oftentimes, like with the radon program, there are state mandated materials that we have to distribute with our results. It includes a list of mitigators on the back, and I don't feel that's appropriate for laboratories to have to distribute a list of everybody. If they're not my client or they're not somebody I know and can vouch for them, I don't want to be saying that this is somebody I recommend. I think that should come down to either the individual lab to recommend who they have familiarity with, or just not recommend anybody at all and let people decide and do their own research.
Thank you. All right. Additional questions? Seeing no additional questions, thank you. Thank you very much. And it's great to have a business here from Auburn. All right. Welcome.
Members of the board, thank you very much for hearing me out. My name is Eric Ogden from Winslow. I'm representing Northeast Laboratory Services. And to piggyback a little bit on what she was saying about the electronic data deliverable, which is the information we submit for all these testings, we've really been struggling with this, all these EDDs that we have from all these different departments. And essentially this program is going to require even more EDDs, because it's going to get pretty confusing where it's a $5 fee for the first test. After that, they won't have to pay for it. That means we're going to also have to collect all that information and organize it, and our systems just aren't ready to handle it. I'm the information systems engineer for the laboratories at NEL, and I can tell you just for the groundwater itself, the EDDs we've been doing by hand because we just don't have the systems to support it. So I've personally, for the last 8 months, been working on these programs, and I would say it's going to take about 4 months of my programming specifically for this to automate this process. And Bo can attest I'm not cheap, so it's running up a lot of money. And we actually spoke to somebody at the state lab who handles these EDDs, Jim Curlett, and we asked them how they handled it. They ended up buying what's called a LIMS system, Laboratory Information Management System, and they roughly spent about $250,000 and a little bit more than that. So if we want to basically automate these EDDs from the start, we're going to have to invest in a LIMS system. We looked into it. The cheapest system we get away with is $150,000, let alone the better ones at $250,000 that the lab has, state lab. So it seems pretty nominal, this $5 fee for each testing, and then also the 3% for the remediation systems. But what's not taken into account is all the extra expenses. Right now, just for groundwater EDDs, we have 3 people working near full-time in the summers to hand create these until I can automate them. It's getting very costly, and it's just driving the price of these testing for all the consumers up. So I would just say, even if it's at a $5 testing and 3% for remediation, if you do a $5 test fee and then 3% on top of a whole house remediation that was earlier suggested several $1,000s, we're talking well over $100 in additional fees. And if this whole program is to, I guess, get more people testing wells, it's creating barriers to entry and barriers to testing. It just seems like it's an oxymoronic statement. And again, complete support for more education, more testing, but the funding is just, it doesn't seem feasible for a small Maine business like ours.
Senator Haskell.
It's an EDD.
Sorry, electronic data deliverable, and that's what's required. It's basically a lot of times we put it in an Excel form, and it has to be in a very specific layout with specific information. If one thing's wrong, it gets sent back. We have to redo it all, and then possible fines if we incur too many of those. And when to the state, well, actually more money back to the state. Sorry, I should have figured that out.
I should know, and I didn't.
Additional questions? Seeing no additional questions, thank you very much for your testimony. Is there additional testimony in opposition to this bill?
Good afternoon, Senator Brakey and Representative Gapine and committee members. My name is Barbara Berry. I live in North Yarmouth, and I represent the Maine Association of Realtors, which is a professional trade association with about 4,300 active realtors and over 400 affiliate members who are in real estate related businesses. We are not opposed to this entire bill. There's just one section of it that we oppose, and that's Section 8, which says that sellers have to give buyers a test that's performed within the last 3 years. And I'll tell you why we're opposed to that section. We provide a lot of information to people on well testing and water testing, and I'm sorry I don't have written materials. I can drop copies of all these things off to you. The first is a mandated brochure on arsenic that was developed I think about 6 years ago by the Department of Health and Human Services, and that talks about arsenic specifically. It's mandated that that is given to every purchaser of property in Maine. Secondly, we have a residential property transaction booklet, and I can get you the relevant pages of that has lots of questions on water testing and why it's important to test your water, specific questions on arsenic. And thirdly, and importantly, in our purchase and sale agreement, there's a due diligence section that lists many, many things that buyer has to make a definitive decision on. Do I want to investigate that, or do I not want to investigate that? There are 2 things on there right now for water. One just says water quality, and one says water radon. There was another bill that went through another committee, went through LCRED a couple of weeks ago, that was similar. It talked about arsenic, and we agreed with the sponsor of that bill that we would go to our forms committee. Our contract review committee meets every summer, so it takes a little time to get the change made, but go to them and ask them to put water arsenic on there instead of just water quality, so or something that would indicate that there's more testing than just a simple water test. I will tell you anecdotally, though, that virtually everybody who buys a house that has a well has it tested, and they almost all have, as to my knowledge now. When I had my company, which I sold quite a few years ago, they had complete tests. They tested for everything. And so I'm sure that that's even more so today because of all the information we give people. So we think that Section 8 is not necessary in the bill because we do provide a ton of information to people, and buyers choose to test the wells for themselves. They want to have their tester do it. They want to have their report. And so I think that's not a necessary part of the bill. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have any.
All right. Thank you. Questions? Representative Hymanson.
Thank you. I'm curious, when people sell, do they have a stack of papers of repeat well testing over the years? That seems to be the problem. You know, when properties transfer, people will get the wells tested and ask questions. But people who live in their houses for a long time, do you get the sense that people are testing their wells?
Not necessarily. I can't answer that very definitively. I don't get the sense that they do. I think they test them a couple of times. Yeah, or if something changes, they'll test it. But I think people test when they move in, and I will say that I think people are fairly ignorant to the fact, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but are not aware of the fact that water quality can change significantly in a short time. I don't think that's necessarily something people are aware of.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Anyone else here today to testify in opposition to this bill? Seeing none, is there anyone here to testify neither for nor against but would like to provide additional information to the committee? Seeing none. Request from the committee for additional information for the work session. Senator Haskell.
Thank you. Two things, Senator. I know there are people who came here today but didn't speak. I wonder if we could have a show of hands of those people who might have come in opposition and didn't speak.
Sure.
Thank
All
you
right.
very much.
Thank you very much for.
And my second
Yes,
question
Senator Haskell.
is, could we ask for, I think it's Andy Smith, who's the state toxicologist. Could we ask if he could be at the work session?
Sure.
Thanks.
Representative Sanderson. Senator Haskell, you might be forward.
Thank you. The gentleman here in the front row, you had some very interesting information, yet you didn't have any written testimony to share with us. Would you be able to supply some of that information via email that could be shared with the committee, so when we're going through all of this before work session, we can go back and reference that material?
Absolutely, and my apologies for that too. I just found out about 2 hours ago.
That's fine. I'm glad even on short notice you made the effort to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like information on how much money we spend on the state lab. So, Representative Hymanson.
Thank you. I would like a statement from the Maine CDC about how they would envision a good messaging program statewide to talk to homeowners regarding frequency and health of their well water. What would a good statewide messaging program look like?
Any additional requests? Seeing none, then all testimony having been taken, this hearing on LD 1162 is now closed.